Our first speaker today is Professor Gordon Emerson. Professor Emerson is an Australian psychologist and the author of numerous research articles and 8 books, including the classic Ego State Therapy. He's best known for the development of resource therapy, a psychodynamic parts therapy that defines personality parts into 8 pathological conditions and 1 normal condition, with a focus on bringing the unwell personality parts into consciousness for direct work. His PhD is from Kansas State University, and it was an experimental study into hypnosis. He completed his postdoctoral internship at Montana State University and taught at Victoria University, Melbourne for many years, prior to becoming a Victoria University Honorary Fellow. His talk today is titled Resource Therapy and Issues Related to Life Post-COVID. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. And I know a lot of you probably haven't heard of resource therapy, so I'm anxious to introduce that to you and explain some ways that I think it can be used in a post-COVID world. I've got slides, so I will go ahead and share those. And please, if you have questions, just write them down for later, and I'll be happy to respond to them. What I'm going to cover, and I'm going to move some things off here. I want to define what resource therapy is and why it's important to recognize parts. It's a parts therapy, psychodynamic parts therapy. And I want to talk about the structure of the personality. Resource therapy has a complete personality theory underpinning it, and how it attends to mental health and pathology. And then I want to get into some things that I see that are problematic for people post-COVID and how resource therapy can respond to that. So resource therapy is a complete therapy and personality theory that can be used for any psychological issue, anything on the DSM-5 that is psychological. Resource therapy can attend to that. And it's based on the theory that we are a mosaic of our parts. We don't have a core. I'm in a part right now. The part that's talking right now is just part of me. And at any time I'm conscious, I'm in one of my parts, and all of my parts together make up Gordon. And that's the way everyone is. And our parts come from childhood. From when we do something over and over again, we develop a coping skill that we can use and go back to, and that becomes one of our resources. So it's very positive. All of our parts are seen as positive, even the parts that do things that are bad. They're doing them for a good reason, and they need to be, they need to learn their purpose so they can change their behavior to a positive behavior to match their purpose. We all have parts. For example, with gambling behavior, one part may gamble and another part may regret it afterward. When a client presents in therapy, the presenting part of the personality is rarely the one with the issue, almost never. The part that comes in and says, "This is why I'm here." It is telling about another personality part that doesn't have a behavior or an emotion that it likes. So it's presenting about another part, not about itself. And a problem, a lot of therapists continue to talk to that part rather than go to the part that needs help. If a student in the classroom told a teacher about a student with another student with a problem, it would not help the upset student if the teacher only spoke with a reporting student. And that's the way I view personality. When a client presents, that's the presenting part, and we need to bring out the part that actually has the problem. And it's not hard to do. We have techniques to bring that part directly into the conscious. Now, this is the picture of the personality according to resource therapy theory. We have one conscious state at any time. Only one state can hold the conscious. And we have several surface states that are also aware of what's going on, and they can communicate with the conscious state. If you're having dinner, one surface state might say to the conscious state, have the dessert. And another surface state might say, no, don't have the dessert. You've eaten too much already. And so you can hear that communication in your head between your conscious state that makes the final decision and experiences and the surface states. And then there are also underlying states that are dissociated from the conscious, that do not know what's going on. And at any time, these states can change positions. A state can move from a surface state into the conscious. A state can move from an underlying state into the conscious. If you are driving down the road and you all at once don't remember the last 15K, or if you're reading a book and all at once don't remember the last 2 paragraphs you read, a state has come in to the conscious from an underlying position, and that state is not aware of what you were just doing. In multiple personality, DID, dissociative identity disorder, these people will often have very few surface states, sometimes none. And states will come from an underlying position into the conscious, and the new state coming into the conscious will be unaware of what the old state just experienced. There's different levels of DID, but that's what's happening. And so a resource state, these are all resource states. A resource state is a physical personality part. It has been laid down by experience, by continuous firing of neurons and through synapses, the dendrites and axons have created a group of brain fibers that fire quite easily and readily. And if you have trained and learned to play a musical instrument, and when you're in the state that can play that musical instrument, it has trained to play that instrument, and it can fire very readily, and you are in a certain mood when you're playing that instrument. And then you change states into a friendship state. It's a different experience with different skills. It's a different resource. So one interesting thing about this is, especially with this conference, is what hypnosis is. Hypnosis is when there are relatively few surface states. If someone focuses enough in their surface state, if they're helped to focus enough in their surface state, in their conscious state, if they focus enough in their conscious state, most of the surface states will sink down to an underlying position. Sometimes all of them. Sometimes there's one they're observing, but a good state of hypnosis, especially a somnambulistic state of hypnosis, most of those surface states are well into an underlying position. And when they come back out, they may have no memory of what happened in hypnosis. If there are surface states that are still there, they can have a memory of what happened in hypnosis. An introject is another core component of resource therapy. An introject is an internalized impression that any of our states can have. It can be an impression of a person, of a place, of an object, of a pet. And we can have an introject of someone from childhood that we're afraid of. And that can bother us. If that state is still hanging on to that introject that it's afraid of, that can bother us and give us psychological issues. We can have an introject of a child when we were in childhood of someone that rejected us, and that can give us issues in adulthood. So introjects are very important in resource therapy. So each resource state has positive and negative introjects. So I have interjects of everybody I know, the state that's talking right now. My childhood, one of my childhood states might have an interject of my mother as she was when I was a child. An adult state would have an interject of her as she was as an adult. It's really quite fascinating. Mental health and pathology. We want all states to be normal. Now, there are pathological states. There's 4 types of pathological states. Retro states do behaviors that we don't want. Vated states have emotions that we don't want. Conflicted states are when 2 states both want to be out at the same time, like a work state and a rest state, or a sleep state and a thinking state. A dissonant state is when we just have the wrong state out. So in resource therapy, we diagnose people into one of the pathologies. There's 2 types of retro states, 4 types of vated states, conflicted in the dissonant state, 8 different pathologies. So when a vated state is in the conscious, that's a state that has emotions we don't like, the person will feel emotional and sometimes feel out of control, sometimes have fear, sometimes have feelings of I'm not good enough. When a retro state is in the conscious, the person will do something that later on we will regret. They may eat something we will regret. They may do gambling. They may do OCD behaviors. They do something we regret. And when a retro avoiding state is in the conscious, it comes up to protect the personality against the bad feelings of a vated state. The person is self-medicating. They are doing a behavior to quell anxiety, and they may not like that behavior. Therefore, it's retro avoiding. So it's really quite fascinating. In resource therapy, we diagnose clients, and then there are a set of actions or techniques, depending on the diagnosis, that are listed out that can bring that pathological state into a state of normality. And it happens very quickly, because when you go to the source, you're not actually talking to a state that doesn't have the problem. You're talking to a state that has the issue. In terms of COVID, here are some of the issues that I see in the post-COVID world. Some people have difficulty re-entering the social work environment. They've been out of it for a while, and they have fears or concerns about re-entering the post-COVID social work environment. Some people have difficulty trusting science, government, and each other, and the news are full of protests and people who aren't trusting science and each other. Some people have pre-existing psychological issues that surface due to stress. Anytime we're stressed, if we have an underlying state that is already feeling fear or anxiety or I'm not good enough, that tends to come to the surface more when we're stressed, and COVID is very stressful. Some people are recovering from long COVID with health issues, and resource therapy, it can affect health. There's a mind-body connection, and I always say, if you don't have an arm, good therapy is not going to grow an arm back. There are things that are purely physical, but there are also a lot of things that times when the way we are psychologically affects our ability to heal and our physical health. When someone comes to resource therapists, the first question is, what are you ready to change today? Both change happens quicker when the therapist and the client are both working on the same thing. What are you ready to change today? Ask the client what they have energy to change, what they think they're ready to change. And you may have to negotiate this with them. But if you can get the client to define a change that they're ready for, then the two of you are on the same side. And that's the issue that you can start working at during that session. And at as when someone answers that question in resource therapy, there's an automatic diagnosis into one of the 8 pathological states. And then the therapist knows exactly what steps to take to help the person return that state from a pathological condition to a normal condition. People that have difficulty re-entering the environment. The client will have a state, if the client has trouble to rejoin the environment, they have conflicted states. The client will have a state that wants to rejoin the world and also a state that is fearful of rejoining. So there's conflict going on the inside. Both of these states are good and valuable, and it's important that they are both respected. In resource therapy, we teach people to always respect a state. And if someone's angry, we respect the state that's angry and want to hear what it's got to say. It's angry often because it doesn't think it's going to be heard. And once it finds out it's going to be heard and understood, then it's no longer angry. So we always respect states. It's important for the therapist to speak respectfully with each state. And in resource therapy, when there's conflicted states, we use separate chairs so they can really identify themselves in a chair. And the therapist brags about each state's value, and each state's encouraged to see the value of another state so they can communicate and compromise and find out which state would be better to rejoin the world and which state doesn't have to. We've always got a state that is there for our benefit. So some people have trouble trusting science. There can be a lack of trust based on logic or emotion. If the client shows a higher level of emotion regarding lack of trust, this is based on fear. And the lack of trust is coming from past trauma. Anytime a person gets emotional, really emotional, and that doesn't really fit what's happening right now, that's due to something that happened previously in their life that they're still carrying with them. So we've all probably seen some people that are very, very angry at different aspects of COVID, and they're not like just expressing themselves and how they think about it. They're very angry. And when that's the case, that anger state, that emotional state needs to be brought into the conscious, needs to find out where that anger is coming from in the past and resolved. So after that anger is resolved, they can make a more logical assessment of what they really want to do. And often they change. Once their anger is resolved, they change their ideas about how they want to handle. But it's important that they can feel empowered to make the right decision for them. Some people have pre-existing psychological issues, and as I said, the stress of COVID can bring out pre-existing issues, and that can be any of the 8 pathologies that's defined in resource therapy, and they're treated just normally as you would with any client. But it's important to realize that this stress can bring out something that isn't related to COVID at all. It was already there, and it just needs to be treated in its own right. And some people are recovering from long COVID health problems. The post-COVID world may be met with physical issues, and the client needs to understand what resources they have and what's the best resource they have given their situation as it is now. We have a term called find resource, and in find resource we define what the client wants to do, a time when it might be difficult for them, and we ask them, how would you like to handle this situation? How would you like to act, and how would you like to feel? And then we find a resource that has that ability to act and feel the way they want to handle the situation, and help them gain access to that part so they can use it. So if they're suffering from physical difficulties, they need to define that and then define how they want to handle that. Given life is the way it is, how they want to respond, how they want to act, and how they want to feel, so they can feel empowered. So knowing our states in resource therapy is pivotal. We are the mosaic of all of our resources. To know yourself is the beginning of wisdom, Aristotle said. So unlike some other parts therapies that think we have a core personality part and then some parts on the side, resource therapy believes we are a mosaic of our parts, and they're all great, and they're all our team, and learning our team is a really positive thing. It's very empowering. And if you want any more information on resource therapy, that's available at resourcetherapy.com or resourcetherapyinternational.com. You can find there's in Europe now, there's over 100 trainers in resource therapy, and in the Middle East and Australia and Indonesia, and it's growing. It only started in 2014. If you want more information, you can find that at Resource Therapy International. Now, I'm supposed to go for 20 minutes, and that's my 20 minutes. So I'm happy for questions. How do we do that? Can resource therapy help people with trust issues? I see there's a question there. Absolutely. People have difficulty trusting out of fear, and usually it's fear of being let down, or fear of not being good enough, not knowing how to respond. So it can easily help people with trust issues. One of the pathologies in resource therapy is baited with confusion. And if the person's confused about a relationship and confused about whether to trust someone or not, you can, there's techniques of having them tell the person that they would like to trust more in an empty chair exactly how they feel. They sit in that chair and then speak back as the other person. And when they sit back in their chair, they have a better understanding of what they can expect from that relationship. What are the practical?
Hi, Anna here. Sorry, I wasn't able to unmute myself. So we've got a couple of questions in the chat box. And I think prior to that, there were some questions asking how is resource therapy different from internal family systems therapy? I think there's a question there on how it differs. Maybe we could take that.
It differs from internal family therapy and ego state therapy and parts therapy in that it has a complete personality theory underpinning it, and it believes that each of our resources are physiological and actual parts of the brain that we can't get rid of and shouldn't want to try to get rid of, and they're all positive. They're all good resources. They just need to learn to do the right thing, so they will be liked by all the other parts. If someone's doing something negative, we talk to that part and say, you're a good part, you should be liked. Let's find out something you can do so all the parts and all the people will like you, because you should be liked. And so it's very empowering, much, I think, more so than the other parts therapies. And it sees the personality as a mosaic where all the parts are, there's no core part.
All right, we've got another one here from Dr. Hira. What are the practical implications of resource therapy, and can it be implied to depersonalization or derealization disorder?
It can, any psychological issue a person has, whether it's DID, borderline, even personality disorders, there are techniques to attend to those. And so it can respond to anything psychological, and it's appropriate because I believe everybody has parts. So it would be silly not to recognize that and not to bring out the part that can benefit most by therapy.
Okay, does anyone have any other question before we let Prof. Gordon? Okay, what we can do is we will be still accepting questions. Okay, we've got
I see a question there.
yeah, I'm just trying to figure this out, how the resource therapy blends. Yeah, I was wondering what's blends in with hypnotic therapy. How does resource therapy blend in?
Okay. You can study resource therapy without first training in hypnosis, but like I believe any good therapy, a lot of hypnosis is used in resource therapy, because anytime you really focus in on a state and you talk to only that state and bring that state out, that is letting the other states sort of go below the surface, and it creates a state of hypnosis. My PhD was in hypnosis, and I've been the president of Hypnosis Society. So I've got quite a background in hypnosis, but the techniques involved in resource therapy utilize hypnosis just as an offshoot, because they're highly focused, and often the person has their eyes closed. To bring out the state you want to bring out, you have them close their eyes and you have them to tell in detail when that state was out, what they see, what they felt, what they smelled, and that brings that state into the conscious, and it creates a light state of hypnosis at the same time.
Okay, I seem to have missed an earlier question by Anne, who asked, what is the definition for the normal state? Because you did mention that, so the normal state, and how it's assessed for each client.
Yeah, it's called a normal state, and it's a state that when it's out, it does something we're happy with, and it gets along with the other states. The goal of resource therapy is for all states to be normal, for all states to appreciate other states to be there, and for us not to have any pathological states that are getting in our way. That doesn't mean we're going to be perfectly happy. You know, we still have COVID, we still have our jobs, we still get old, we still, you know, things happen that we have to deal with, but being able to deal with them with a group of states that appreciate each other is a lot easier.
Yeah, I guess that ties in with what Laurie is asking as well. If it's all parts are positive in resource therapy, are we encouraging particular parts to change? So I think
we do encourage parts to change, but one thing we would never do is to complain about the behavior of a part, because that makes that part intransigent and reactive. It's much easier to get it to change if you say, you're a good part, you've got this good purpose, let's find a good way to accomplish that purpose so other parts will like you. So we don't, and we get it to commit to this new behavior, and that changes the behavior much quicker than if we attack the behavior and cause that state not to like us and not to want to work with us.
okay, so if we do get any further questions, we will email it to you, and we'll also send the answers back to the participants. With that,
I'll just also say, in working with trauma, if there's a fear from the past, we shrink that fear and tell the client they have to be in the state that is afraid. We tell that state, it's not happening now. You can say whatever you want to it, and we don't have it fight. We teach it that it's in power now, and it doesn't have to worry about that thing from the past. So thank you very much. I appreciate all the questions.
Thank you.